As we continue exploring this issue, I'm now joined by Dr Siyabonga Nzimande, who is a children's rights activist. Dr. Nzimande, a pleasure to have you on the program despite these circumstances. Let's begin by covering the latest developments. The 12 pupils at Pretoria High School for girls have been found not guilty of the racism allegations. How do you view the decision of the disciplinary hearing here? And what might this imply about the handling of racism cases in schools?
Greetings to you as well as the viewers at home. There's a Chinese proverb that says, a crisis is an opportunity that is riding on a deadly wind. And I think there's an opportunity here, not just for the government, which is the Department of Education, not just for the South African Governing Bodies Association, which governs how governing bodies should be able to actually ensure that we don't have these issues within our schools. But there's an opportunity here to begin a conversation and a social cohesion conversation that should be taking place within that school, because clearly the learners found not guilty. That's another story that we might need to dig deeper into it. But why is it still existing? It's sad to see that we're still having these conversations, and I think that in 30 years of democracy, and we find ourselves stuck in a situation like this, where I really think that between the South African Schools Act, something is not being implemented. It's one thing to say teachers are trained about this, but where is the child participation? How are we making sure that children are involved in issues that are directly affecting them? When we come up with school of code of conduct and these hearings are taking place, they are governed by the code of conduct of the school. And when the department comes in as well, because this is their children, this is their school, and interfere and intervene actually, how much are we taking into consideration the voices of a child, especially a Black African child that finds themselves in that school? I'm not happy as an activist around how this issue is handled. I feel like it should be dug deeper, and it's not just an issue of finding some not guilty, but it's an issue of those remaining in school still feeling uncomfortable. So it means it calls for an uncomfortable conversation that need to take place in that particular school. And beyond that uncomfortable conversation, there should be a meaningful child participation.
To take from your words, you say that it's sad that we're still having these kind of conversations. But the case, when you look at it really, it does involve allegations that of this alleged whites-only WhatsApp group where racist microaggressions, if you will, were allegedly shared here between these children. How significant is the role of such digital platforms in really perpetuating racism? And what measures can schools take to monitor and indeed address these issues?
I think it's very clear. We need to look at, I always say this when I work with schools, mainly the Department of Education will feel very uncomfortable with myself as an activist, because I will always push within the department, even in this highest level within the DDG's office and coming down even at the minister's office. One will really still push for saying that it's not enough to say that we have a policy. It's not enough to say we have a code of conduct. It's not enough if we are not going to take into consideration that we need to shape certain programs. Either we're looking at curriculum integration, where we are going to talk about critical race conversation, or either we're going to really look at extracurricular activities that need to be in school that can be able to address such as this. What is sad, though, is that schools don't have time for extracurricular. So that's why we need to really push to say how much of our curricula, especially in these called Model C schools, where it's schools that were previously advantaged, they were previously white schools only. Now we're getting an African child coming into that school, and we're relying only on documents, but we are not creating an enabling environment. It's twofold. Either we're looking at curriculum development and urgently we integrate, as we did with sexuality comprehensive education, but it's not implemented. It should be monitored as well by the department that it is happening. And then one thing of the message is going viral, which can be damaging mentally, not just for the learners themselves, but the community itself, which really calls for that social cohesion element that says within this rainbow nation, where the colors meet, where they blend, what makes them blend? What makes a black person really blend with the white person without the white person saying you sound different, or the black person says I feel welcomed by you? Where is that blending supposed to take place? I think that's a critical question.
You've also cited that there is this need for schools to start having these uncomfortable conversations. There has been criticism of this school's handling of the racism allegations. What are the key principles that should guide the response of educational institutions themselves when faced with racism complaints here?
It's very important for every school and for every governing body of that school, including the school management team, to understand that when we come up with the code of conduct of the school and whatever rules and regulation that's going to create an enabling environment for an African child to be in that school, that it does not speak higher than the South African Constitution. Section 9 of the Constitution guarantees the right to equality. And that Section 9 is divided into 3 parts. The first part is the right to equality before the law and equality for protection and benefit. And then number 2, the state must provide positive measures. And the state is not somebody coming from parliament. The state is the government and the governing body, including learner representative councils, to begin to be active enough in ensuring that they craft these rules together, these enabling conversations together, because I really feel, and I'm going to say it very boldly, we have left out the voice of the child in all of this conversation. Even in that disciplinary hearing, I am pretty much sure that child participation was quite minimal. If we can really bring our children's voices to the front and allow children to have a voice in crafting these, we'll have a smooth operating schools in our country.
Let's explore that point even further. What impact do incidents like these have on the overall school's environment and also the experiences of students of different racial backgrounds?
I think it has a huge impact. One can never deny that psychosocial support remains a questionable ideology. That is something that we still need to question, that how much of psychosocial support does exist within the school environment that ensures that the learner, when we say psychosocial support, we say before you can teach me, you have to reach me.
Right.
And then teachers will complain and say, how do I reach 70 learners in 5 different classrooms in one day? That's the problem that the government need to go back and look at the teacher ratio and be able to reach all learners before you can teach them, so that we can be able to look at how do we mitigate the impact, the negative impact of racism that still exists, the negative impact that may resist even between learner relationship between themselves, of still seeing color, which I'm not saying they should be blinded into color, but they should be blended into a way that could create a safe environment for all learners that are within the school. So it's going to go back to the Department of Education itself, that when are we going to stick to the ratio of the learner that are supposed to be in class, so that we can be able to meaningfully implement the policies that are stipulated and that don't speak higher. Because what I find very funny, even with these schools, and I stand to be corrected, is that we find out that there are certain school policies and laws that speak higher than the South African Constitution. Why is that school not receiving guidance in how we deal with learners, how we deal with racism, how do we deal with stigma and discrimination within that institution as well? There's a lot of papers that are written, there's a lot of guidance that is provided, there's a lot of, even the Child Institute within University of Cape Town, they've cited quite a lot. Section 27, look at a lot of other alternatives that could be done within a school environment to do this. But is the school environment itself, as education as it is, provide enough room for this conversation to take place? It's something that we need to call accountability within the Department of Education itself. It will be very interesting actually to see how government intervene within this case, and not just, it's not a one-day event. It will have to be an event, an activity that is going to take place, be monitored. It must be outcome-based. There must be research. There must be and questionnaires where we need to question, and so that we can measure the change. At the moment, there's no measurements that we are using in school. No one is measuring. We are very good to measuring crime. We are very good at measuring teenage pregnancy. But why are we not measuring racism in schools?
Let's speak to the Department of Education's response. So as things stand right now, the department has suspended the principal of the school. In your view, what role should school leadership play in really preventing and addressing racism cases? And how should accountability be managed here?
Number one, it is good that the Department of Education has intervened and suspended the school principal. However, it's not enough in just that bold act of saying the department has intervened in this way. The department must also be able to present a thorough program that need to be placed in that particular school. That must involve parents. The parents need to be involved. The learners need to be involved as the community of the school and those other stakeholders, because a school is not just an island. There are non-governmental organizations, the civil society that is there, there's the community, the policing forum, you name it. There's a lot of other stakeholders that are currently around the school that we need to see them to be present as they remedy this situation. Again, I cannot stress how this is not a single idea that we are just going to act. It should be a program that is going to be rolled out and be outcomes-based and be measured, and the parents must be part of that. Because let me be honest with you, when a child is racist and come into school and throw racial remarks, we need to question where they come from. What home do they come from? So we need the parent bodies to come on board. And we can't be looking cute right now because it's going to affect this learner psychologically. This learner will be, even when they go to a work environment, they will still see that this is how I was treated back then, and this is how I'm going to respond to it even in the near future. If we aid this and if we properly put measures into place, we'll be able to save that African child.
Dr. Siyabonga Nzimande, he's a children's rights activist, giving us his perspective, of course, on this ongoing discussion regarding racism in schools.